What's up, folks, and welcome back to the Bellicose Nation. You know, it takes a country like Russia to step up to the plate and knock the ball out of the park. Yep. Russia is on the verge, if they haven't already, to pass a law to preserve their culture and their traditional family life by outlawing any propaganda which elevates any sexual practice contrary to their traditions in front of minors. Now, of course, like any such measure to preserve culture, it gets the default label of anti-gay. Which, by the way, why aren't gay folks offended at that? I mean, you know, anytime a city, a state, a county enacts some type of legislation which applies to any unorthodox sexual activity, and it gets the label as anti-gay, as if they are the only pioneers in unconventional sex. Now, naturally, you know, many in the West are going to be upset by this. They see this as infringements on rights and of sexual minorities and all that. But don't societies have a basic right to decide for themselves what is being taught as good, wholesome, and natural to their kids? And, you know, I got to tell you, speaking of kids, I got a little chuckle out of this whole thing from one angle. And that is that they pulled a page from the liberal playbook by using their refrain, "Oh, it's for the kids." That was kind of funny. Now, come on. But let's get into this story a little deeper, because I have a little insight into the Russian culture, and this move is actually a little deeper than just keeping gays or anyone else from trying to change the family culture in Russia. You know, even though homosexual acts were against the law for decades under the Soviet regime, most people don't realize those laws were abolished in around 1993, I think it was, after the fall of communism. So what happened? Why 2 decades later are they taking this measure? Would one suppose that the distaste for homosexuals has increased in these 2 decades? I rather doubt that. One of the huge problems Russia and nearly all of Europe has experienced is a collapse in birth rates. But Russia is one of the few countries which has taken this as a very serious threat to their country's existence. Under Putin, a number of measures were passed to encourage and subsidize families to have children. And they have really made some pretty good progress because their birth rates just continue to fall. And like nearly all of Western history, they see the elevation of homosexuality as a counterproductive thing in society, and to the formation of good morals in strong families. But here's what's changed. Gays have lived a quiet and even accepted existence in Russia for years. They pretty much keep to themselves, and for the most part, they're left alone. But for about the last decade, outside groups kept converging on Russia, insisting on gay rights marches and other gay activism. And from what I understand, a large number of Russian homosexuals were actually opposed to this, as they saw it as an antagonistic thing towards the broader culture. Sort of like if you and your wife were swingers in your private life, and though you guys enjoyed this lifestyle, you still recognize that it's probably best overall to keep these activities carried out with discretion. And, you know, we don't realize it, but there are a lot of gays in the West as well, the United States and Europe, who feel the same way. They're not for gay marriage. In fact, I'll put a link below to a BBC story that you can read a little bit about it. You know, another motivation no doubt has to do with the wild success homosexuals have increasingly had in the West. 20 years ago, they just wanted to be free to be gay and left alone. Then they wanted civil unions. Next, it was the right to marry and adopt kids. And then shazam, the next thing you know, we are actually paying gay groups ungodly amounts of tax dollars to come into our public schools to indoctrinate kids on sexuality under the guise of anti-bullying and sex education. And, of course, now the whole transgender movement is gearing up as well. And you have to know, Russians and others around the world look at this and they realize there is no basement to this movement. So Russia cleverly passed a law which allows gays or other movements that might pop up to exist but not promote to the wider culture. And the Russians have no doubt took note of the gay propaganda we've enjoyed here in the United States and in Europe. where the last few decades, always inserting these sympathetic gay characters in every film and every TV show, and then demonizing any character who is not warmly for it. In fact, the last I checked, CBS was running a positive gay character in 38% of its new programming. 38%. That's more than a third. And only about 5 or 6% of people claim to be gay in the census. But the propaganda goes on. And propaganda is one-sided information. Now, Russia also has another trend to consider, where the rest of the West is overall diminishing in matters of faith. After 7 decades of militant atheism, Russia is experiencing growth in the faith area. The Russian Orthodox Church is growing, and let me tell you, the men in Russia are not the hippie Jesus Christians like you see in the West. These guys are ready to go out in the street. They're ready to confront these folks who would try to change their culture. And this ain't just skinheads either. These are average men and women and even clergy. And they're out there and they are ready to brawl. Now, it remains to be seen how this law will be carried out. What will be considered propaganda, and to what degree might children hear it that it might be illegal? Will they ban movies from the U.S. or simply change the words when they do the voiceover translations? So we'll have to see how this unfolds. But I got to tell you, I am glad to see Russia take this step, something that preserves the family culture. And it may well be that other countries follow. I think Poland was considering something along this line not long ago. And in some ways, if you think about it, this is kind of a win-win for both sides. People are permitted to live alternative lifestyles, but they just can't promote it around children. And I know some of my gay friends out there, they're going to want to play the moral dictator where they get to decide which sex habits should be blessed with rights and marriage and adoption and all that. But I have to tell you, I kind of think that the people who live in these countries and communities, they should decide what is acceptable and what is normal and what is reasonable. Okay, now you've heard me, you've heard my view, you heard my words. Now I want to hear from you. And feel free to subscribe and all that. This is the Bellicose Nation.